The following report are the journalistic principles and practices of the values and goals that Global News as a company promises to the public to uphold an information briefing regimen, and that they hold a high responsibility to transcribe to the world with the practice of an ethical code of professional conduct. In this report, we will see multiple major breaches in the ethical code they swear to upkeep that is litigated on their own journalistic principles and practices page of their website. And with all the malicious journalism lies that they portray to the Canadian public and to the American public, the irreversible damages that they've caused to Bobby's company and Bobby and his children's life will have serious ramifications for 2 generations forward to his family's life. In addition, the psychological fear of assassination is a traumatic stress setting that has left all of Bobby and his family living in fear in their own home. The behavioral reflection from the public of hate is also a great mitigating factor taint that they have to now live with due to this 239-minute aired piece Global News aired, and the financial blockage of income due to the action of Global News has left Bobby's whole life in despair. This report will also show that they had all the necessary relevant data prior to airing the 239-minute broadcasted televised repot, which shows great malice towards Bobby and his companies. On October 3, 2023, the United States Treasury Department published an article press release on their government website that Bobby Shah and his company Valerian Labs Holdings Corp. would be placed on the SDN, Specialty Designated National, Sanction List to be barred by doing business with every U.S.-based company around the world. On October 4, 2023, a gentleman by the name of Andrew McClintosh published an article on Global News website. Mr. McClintosh called Bobby the day before of the published article he published and said he was with Global News and had some questions for Bobby to answer. This was Bobby's very first time speaking with a news reporter, so Bobby allowed Mr. McClintosh to take lead on the questioning, and Bobby provided him the answers he requested. The article Mr. McClintosh published about Bobby on November 4, 2023 was very specific to the data answers Bobby had provided him, and Bobby felt that the published article about him was very fair to the narrative Bobby had litigated to Mr. McClintosh. On October 6, 2023, Bobby received a phone call from Catherine Urquhart, who said that she was from Global News and that she had a couple questions for him, as he had been counseled the day before from his lawyer to not engage with the media. Although Mr. McClintosh had published a very fair and factual article about Bobby 2 days prior to Ms. Urquhart's call, Bobby proceeded to tell Ms. Urquhart that his counsel told him not to speak to the media any longer, and proceeded to tell Ms. Urquhart to have a good day, and proceeded to hang up. Before Bobby had a chance to hang up the call with Catherine, she abruptly led with such a shocking and out-to-lunch question that Bobby could not at all not respond to her question, as her question was so ridiculous that leaving her question unaddressed would have been overviewed much worse. The conversation went as follows. Catherine: Hi, is this Valerian Labs? Bobby: Hi, may I ask whom this is? Catherine: This is Catherine Urquhart from Global News. Is this Bobby Shah? Bobby: Yes, it is, but my lawyer told me not to speak to the press anymore. Catherine: Is it true that you make precursor chemicals and ship them to China? Bobby: What? No. What? Is that even a thing? No. Catherine: Well, you bought a pill press. Bobby: I have an NHP site license for the production of natural health products. Catherine: Well, you bought methylamine HCl. Bobby: Yes, it is a legal commodity in Canada. It is one of 220 different chemicals I house. Ms. Catherine, can you please be kind enough and go into my website from your phone so I may address a number of subjects? Catherine: Okay, Bobby, once on the home screen of my website, please click Other Certificates and Licenses. Once Catherine told Bobby she had arrived to the certificates and licenses of Bobby's website from her mobile phone, Bobby proceeded to go over every diploma, license, and certificate he held in Canada that he had posted on his website to be permitted to practice in the various industries he was in. The conversation ended very positive, and Bobby personally it was left felt that he was finally given an opportunity to have someone audit all the diplomas, licenses, and certificate that he had accomplished in life to operate in the industries he practiced in. He wanted to go into detail about the licenses he held, and the added shock that how crazy this whole thing was for him. And due to the article from Mr. McClintosh, his confidence in media as a whole and Global News was quite high and trusting, as the article from Mr. McClintosh was beyond fair and factual. Bobby did not have any trust issues whatsoever, as he was to believe that all reporters would be very truthful and factual to their published reporting just like Mr. McClintosh. Or so he thought. How oblivious Bobby was in trusting Catherine and Global News. The following is 8 clips from the 2-minute and 39-second televised nationwide broadcast Global News aired about Bobby and his companies, and will be addressing all the ethical breaches in their own ethical code, and transcribe what they have done in each of the clip, and address the malice of to the lies published about Bobby and his companies.
So I'm just gonna bang on here. It goes
at Valerian Labs and Valerian Labs Distribution in Port Coquitlam. There was no obvious activity, and no one answered the door.
While the clip fairly notes that there was no obvious activity and that no one answered the door, it sets the stage for the preceding clips, which create an image of an unoccupied or abandoned location. The statements may be true, but this opens the door to interpretation. There was no note of any attempted contact or to set an appointment. There was zero information provided about the visit to Bobby or any staff members. The knock on the lower door and pan to the zoom shot of a tinted mirrored window on an uninvited and undisclosed visit portrays some form of avoidance and non-presence at all times, especially due to the daytime shot and trucks arriving. What could be perceived from a member of the general public? Introducing this news piece with the title card, U.S. Sanctions Local Man in Fentanyl Investigation, which alludes to involvement, or something related to fentanyl or criminality about to be shown. This clip conveys an empty or front location as it seems empty and void of activity, or that Bobby Shah is avoiding the location due to the investigation to the title.
Door.
Let's go try this side door.
The companies and owner Bobby Shah are facing tough sanctions from the U.S. government amid allegations of buying and distributing chemicals and equipment used to produce fentanyl and other illicit drugs. The civil actions and criminal indictments by the Biden administration are aimed at companies making deadly narcotics.
This clip continues from the previous one. It has the reporter on site walking to the side entrance near the bay doors, receiving doors, to knock as it portrays a persistence to try and reach someone and locate someone to speak with on site. The reporter on site also tries to open the door. While this is being done, the narrator of the clip is introducing the topic. The companies and owner Bobby Shah are facing tough sanctions from the U.S. government. Then there is a brief pause. During the ending part of this clip, 6 images taken from reporting done by Global News on April 12, 2023 related to police drug busts where the products were seized and on display by police related to the events shown in publications from Global News related to those events were shown. The images used were from a separate and non-related event, and with the language from the narrator utilized. The narrator states, amid allegations of buying and distributing chemicals and equipment used to produce fentanyl and other illicit drugs, the civil actions and criminal indictments by the Biden administration are aimed at companies making deadly narcotics. What could be perceived from a member of the general public, going from an empty warehouse, stated previously as an appearance of affront, to a narration about allegations, chemicals, used to produce fentanyl and other illicit drugs, criminal indictments by the Biden administration aimed at companies making deadly narcotics, while 6 images of narcotics and other illicit substances are shown and emphasized using an image showing suspect fentanyl, with the statement used to product fentanyl, transitions to other illicit drugs, showing what is assumed to be a table of illicit substances, and companies making deadly narcotics, using the same suspect fentanyl image, regardless of if the first assumption of affront, something that a person could easily consider true, but considering there are some members of the public who are distrustful or cautious when it comes to brief segments, any member of the general public would easily connect to the property introduced, Bobby Shah, the companies and the drugs being taken from that property directly, which include fentanyl. As the drugs are being overviewed, the narrator alludes to the U.S. government as well, which was the title card at the start. This combined with the direct messages about fentanyl and illicit substances, and the making of fentanyl would create a perception that not only were the drugs seized from the site, but that fentanyl and other illicit substances were being produced on site. The following video that will be played for your review is the source video that Global News aired back in April 2023 about a high-profile drug raid that occurred in Richmond, BC, and factually was completely unrelated to Bobby Shah and Valerian Labs. This video is where Global News copied the tables containing drug clips and elegantly pasted the clips in the nationwide televised aired piece about Bobby and Valerian Labs, making it look like Catherine actually had opened the door to the warehouse. And what was behind the door was obviously the tables full of drugs that were found in Bobby's warehouse. This inference is made from the general public as Catherine Urquhart in the previous video clip walks up to the warehouse door of Valerian Labs and knocks, then leads to turning the door handle, and immediately these tables full of drugs are being displayed by the RCMP, making it look like to show a massive search and seizure they had just done in a high-profile drug raid. But this was not the case at all. The great showmanship Global News did by copying these tables full of drugs and pasting the clips in the story they did about Bobby made Bobby look like a fentanyl-producing kingpin that the RCMP had just raided and had found copious amounts of drugs in his company warehouse address. The source clips Global News used of the tables full of drugs are as follows.
Police seized nearly 28 kilograms of fentanyl, as well as 2 kilograms of cocaine, 800 grams of methamphetamine, and $365,000 in cash.
It's the result of yet another drug bust that shut down a major fentanyl lab, this time in a residential Richmond neighborhood.
The value of these drugs is estimated to be $7.8 million.
And the list goes on.
Over $68,000 of cash, 2 replica handguns, over a kilo of cocaine.
Different jurisdiction, same story.
During the search, we uncovered copious amounts of drugs, money, as well as a stick of dynamite.
Both Vancouver Police and West Shore RCMP outlining the success of their respective investigations Wednesday, highlighting the impact this will have on drug trafficking operations in the province.
Now circling back and continuing to address the news story about Bobby and Valerian Labs, after the tables full of drugs portion, it follows to a press conference being addressed by Attorney General Merrick B. Garland, addressing the following.
We know that this global fentanyl supply chain, which ends with the deaths of Americans, often starts with chemical companies in China.
The words fentanyl, deaths, and China can elicit some form of emotion, as in 2023 and 2024, there is a significant amount of news coverage related to these topics, and it is always that it is something someone else is doing against our country. The Department of Justice Washington creates a legitimacy to the entirety of the news segment, and as it is in the same publication as the previous ones, even though it is directly unrelated to Bobby Shah or Valerian Labs.
The sanctions effectively cut off Shah and his companies from the entire U.S. financial system. Clients cannot buy anything from him, and he can't do business with any American vendors.
The narrator in this clip is briefing the world that the sanctions effectively cut off Shah and his companies from the U.S. financial system. The sentence clients cannot buy anything from him, and he can't do business with any American vendors, is a false statement that clearly asserts that clients cannot purchase anything from him. Any person at all would entirely believe that as it was stated as a fact. There was no entity other than Global News which said the statements, clients cannot buy anything from him. What could be perceived from a member of the general public? Building upon the previous statements, after all that, why would a person want to buy from someone who makes fentanyl? They wouldn't. But if someone who researched the topic and had a brilliant memory of the drugs being from April 12, 2023 from an unrelated event wanted to buy something, they would be entirely unable to, as the statement, clients cannot buy anything from him, means that no one is allowed to buy anything from Bobby Shah and or Valerian Labs.
Have for my facility a natural health product site license for production of natural health products.
This scene shows that Catherine took the phone from her ear and directly put it on speaker, with Bobby Shah's first statement being, "I have A for my facility, a natural health product site license for production of natural health products." While this is something that was said, there were more significant aspects to the report, such as the customs vetting procedures explained, the precursor licenses, and other key factors. What could be perceived from a member of the general public? That Bobby Shah started the conversation talking about natural health product site licenses and was either trying to prove innocence by talking about something legitimate and not related to chemicals as its natural health products, and or avoiding the topic of the allegations previously mentioned.
The U.S. alleges Valerian Labs received shipments of methylamine hydrochloride, a precursor chemical used to produce methamphetamine and MDMA.
Methylamine is legal in Canada. Methylamine is one of 220 different chemicals in house.
The clip shows the U.S. Attorney General Merrick B. Garland speaking, then shows a man in a hazmat suit removing 6 jugs of an unknown substance from an area which is cautioned off from the public, then showing what appears to be some sort of drug lab due to the low quality of the storage and the casual beverage on some unknown chemical going into a different portion of the inferred drug production facility as shown by the low quality and jerry-rigged items such as stove-top pots and large vessels. It then goes to a scene reminiscent of clip 5, where the phone is still on speaker in the same position. The narrator speaks over the footage. The U.S. alleges Valerian Labs received shipments of methylamine hydrochloride, a precursor chemical used to produce methamphetamine and MDMA. Afterwards, Bobby Shah can be heard saying, "Methylamine is legal in Canada. Methylamine is one of 220 different chemicals I house." During the narration, the narrator says, "Received shipments of methylamine hydrochloride, a precursor chemical." During the portion where the person in the hazmat suit is removing the chemicals and says, "Used to produce methamphetamine and MDMA," during the portion of the 2 images showing some sort of illicit clandestine-style laboratory. What could be perceived from a member of the general public? That the United States utilized some form of action to remove chemicals present from Valerian Labs, possibly through some form of collaborative effort or tip-off, as the images clearly emphasize removal and clandestine settings. It would be directly assumed that Valerian Labs is being spoken about, along with methamphetamine and MDMA, that these items were being produced at Valerian Labs, and the seizure was occurring at Valerian Labs, with the 2 clips of the clandestine laboratory being Valerian Labs itself. This inference can be taken without any previous information provided from Global as an excerpt, but in combination with the previous clips shown by Global News directly makes the continued assumption that criminality occurred, as this was most likely where the previous drugs were from. The phrase inserted from Bobby Shah, as it was still the same setting of the speakerphone, appears to be a continuation from the natural health product portion, and would look defensive, and could be inferred as legitimizing something that shouldn't be legal from what context clues previously displayed of the removal and laboratory.
Hey guys, welcome to my beautiful family home.
In 2018, Shah's home was raided by the RCMP and targeted in a civil forfeiture lawsuit alleging he had committed fraud and his family was living off proceeds of crime. The suit claimed that when police raided Shah's home and business, they found a cache of luxury items, multiple cell phones, blank checks and bank cards in other people's names, credit card machines, and credit card printers. The suit also claimed Shah and his wife had declared their total combined income was less than $51,000. Shah challenged the police search warrant, and it was successfully overturned.
Let's make this magic happen together.
Then, in 2022, Shah's estranged wife Ramina was stabbed to death in a Coquitlam parkade. Her murder remains unsolved.
The clip starts with Ramina Shah introducing a home and continues speaking but slowly cannot be heard as the narrator takes over by introducing an image from 2018 where a police vehicle is in front of Bobby Shah's home and a second one with a car behind it, then shows a selfie of Bobby Shah and 2 of Ramina Shah ending with an overlaid image of a dismissed action. The narrator mentions allegations of fraud and living off proceeds of crime and findings of luxury items, cell phones, blank checks and bank cards, credit card machines and printers, and a declaration of a combined income of $51,000. With a brief statement that Shah challenged the police search warrant and it was successfully overturned. Out of context from the previous clips and statements, this would appear to a member of the general public to cover some story related to Bobby Shah showing some potential criminality which paint a negative picture. But Global News intentionally failed to mention was why it was all dismissed with a reference to the decision to this case on the Go to Case Law website called Kenlee or Regina versus Shah. The Honorable Justice who tried this case found that there was 5 major Charter of Rights breaches in the information to obtain the search warrant and the execution of the search warrant from the RCMP's gross negligence from overreaching the execution of the warrant by seizing over 90% of the contents of the items from the Shah's residence. The Honorable Justice also determined that the RCMP failed to consider that tax returns from 2015-2016 could not determine the Shah's wealth in 2018 and neglected to investigate income generated from legitimate business enterprises they acknowledged to exist and overlooked the possibility of access to family wealth, which was testified by the lead investigator of the Economics Crimes Unit. More so, it was testified that despite having experts capable of conducting lifestyle or revenue assessments, none were engaged, leaving the RCMP unable to determine whether the Shah's lifestyle was sustainable based on their revenue streams. Furthermore, the RCMP infringed Shah's Charter of Rights by flying helicopters with high-powered telescopes over the Shah residence ongoingly without a warrant. The search of Mr. Shah's home resulted in the mistreatment of his 1-year-old child, which during the search Mr. Shah was arrested, leaving the infant under police supervision. His wife, Ms. Shah, was taking an exam at UBC when she was notified. She left immediately and called a friend to pick up the child, but the police refused to allow the friend to do so. Ms. Shah arrived home 80 minutes later and was barred from entering despite repeatedly and urgently requesting the return of her child. The RCMP kept the infant hostage and delayed returning the infant for 51 minutes to her mother's arrival. This gross misconduct from the RCMP for those those 51 minutes had left Romina believing her child was hurt or had died, as they wouldn't provide any reasoning for why the child was not being produced to be reunited with her immediately upon her arrival. When finally returned, the infant was soaked in urine head to toe, as the diaper had not been changed during the hours of police custody or had the infant been fed. The court noted the lack of reasonableness in how the police handled the situation. Furthermore, prior to the commencement of the trial of Mr. Shah, the RCMP had given away items they had seized from the Shah residence to the so-called victims without any judicial decision. It is for a judicial officer during a trial to determine whether seized items were stolen or whether the complainants were the victims of any kind of fraud or theft whatsoever. It was also testified by the accused that all 29 victims were themselves targets of the investigation and not victims. Being part of the allegations, they alleged themselves being involved in receiving commissions of 25% for the in-store credit they were applying for and reselling the goods at a lower discount for monetary gain. The negligent failure of the police to follow the important post-search procedure set out in S-490 constituted a clear breach of the applicant's rights under the Canadian Charter of Rights.
Happened together.
Then, in 2022, Shah's estranged wife Romina was stabbed to death in a Coquitlam parkade. Her murder remains unsolved.
We know who is responsible for poisoning the American people with fentanyl.
As for
This clip shows Romina Shah standing outside a home. It then transitions into a dark parkade and slowly drifts around the apparent murder scene of Romina Shah, with images of blood on the floor. There is an immediate transition directly after this to Attorney General Merrick B. Garland at a portion of his press conference. The narrator, then in 2022, Shah's estranged wife Romina was stabbed to death in a Coquitlam parkade. Her murder remains unsolved. Attorney General Merrick B. Garland: we know who is responsible for poisoning the American people with fentanyl. What could be perceived from a member of the general public? This clip directly is after the 2018 statements. And for some unknown reason, this story about sanctions related to chemicals which can be potentially used for illicit narcotics changes focus to an unsolved murder. It is directly towards the high point of the story. After the portion of facts that occurred in clip 7, which this clip uses the transition, then in 2022, as if it was somehow tied or related. Regardless, the public perceptions would be, without previous context, it would appear that Bobby Shah had some involvement in the murder, as it ends with, her murder remains unsolved. But directly after that, it has Attorney General Merrick B. Garland saying, we know who is responsible for poisoning the American people with fentanyl. This statement directly after the unsolved statement easily paints a picture of Bobby Shah being a murderer. With the previous context from the news segment, it would make the previous thought of Bobby Shah being not just a murderer, but a fentanyl-slinging narco mastermind who had been raided over and over and has laboratories producing fentanyl and other illicit substances.
We know who is responsible for poisoning the American people with fentanyl.
As for the newly announced sanctions, Shah says he will appeal them and remains adamant that he has done nothing wrong. Catherine Urquhart, Global News.
This clip starts with Attorney General Merrick B. Garland holding a press conference on October 3, 2023. This portion used was when Attorney General Merrick B. Garland said the following: we know who is responsible for poisoning the American people with fentanyl. Right after this, and selfie of Bobby Shah is shown with a second selfie afterwards. The clip the narrator saying, as for the newly announced sanctions, Shah says he will appeal them and he has done nothing wrong. Catherine Urquhart, Global News. What could be perceived from a member of the general public? The sentence said by U.S. Attorney General Merrick B. Garland is a definitive and dire one. It is severe and extreme. Deaths and fentanyl are both horrific topics and exceptionally personal for so many. This sentence said by such a high-ranking, trustworthy member of the United States during a press conference with the background of Department of Justice shows extreme confidence in what he is saying. Afterwards, an image of Bobby Shah is shown. This not only infers but directly alludes to Bobby Shah being the person who is responsible, asserted by U.S. Attorney General Merrick B. Garland. Then related to sanctions, it says Bobby Shah will appeal them and has done nothing wrong, which after something so powerful and decisive combined with the previous clips taken, which appear defensive, shows some form of self-protection and avoidance. What any member of the public would infer from this, regardless of the previous portions, would be that Bobby Shah is the person solely responsible for the deaths and poison caused by fentanyl in the United States of America. With the previous portions of the news segment included, this would cause any person to infer that Bobby Shah is also responsible for fentanyl in Canada as well. This 6 seconds of Mr. Garland's speech Global News took and pasted into this 2-minute and 39-second televised piece was completely taken out of context and was completely unrelated to Bobby, but actually was a 9-minute and 30-second speech that Mr. Garland made to the public about the capture and apprehension and indictment and extradition of the son of infamous Chapo Guzman, who was the boss of the Sinaloa cartel and 12 of his high-ranking cartel members. The full speech is as follows.
Good afternoon. Fentanyl is the deadliest drug threat the United States has ever faced. It is nearly 50 times more potent than heroin and is a nearly invisible poison. Just 2 milligrams of fentanyl, the amount that could fit at the tip of a pencil, is a potentially lethal dose. I am joined today by Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo, DEA Administrator Ann Milgram, and Chief Postal Inspector Gary Barksdale. We are here today to announce a series of actions we are taking to target the trafficking of fentanyl at every stage and in every part of the world. But more important, we are here today to deliver a message on behalf of the United States government. We know who is responsible for poisoning the American people with fentanyl. We know who is responsible for shattering families and communities across the United States with drug poisonings and overdoses. We know that behind the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans is a cartel-driven fentanyl trafficking network that spans countries and continents. We know that this network includes the cartel's leaders, their drug traffickers, their money launderers, their clandestine lab operators, their security forces, their weapons suppliers, and their chemical suppliers. And we know that this global fentanyl supply chain, which ends with the deaths of Americans, often starts with chemical companies in China. Our agents and prosecutors are working every day to get fentanyl out of our communities and bring to justice those who put it there. Recently, that work has included charging 23 Sinaloa cartel members, associates, and leaders for their roles in running the largest, most violent, and most prolific fentanyl trafficking operation in the world. And it has included the department's first ever charges against chemical companies based in China for trafficking fentanyl precursor chemicals directly into the United States. Today, we are announcing several more actions we are taking across the government to disrupt every single aspect of the global fentanyl trafficking network. First, in 8 separate indictments in the middle and southern districts of Florida, the Justice Department charged 8 companies based in China and 12 of their executives for crimes related to the production, distribution, and importation of fentanyl, other synthetic opioids, methamphetamines, and their precursor chemicals. As detailed in the indictments unsealed today, the precursor chemicals used to make synthetic opioids like fentanyl are primarily manufactured and distributed by China-based chemical companies. These companies advertise the sale of precursor chemicals online using different websites and social media platforms. They then ship the building blocks needed to create deadly drugs all over the world. To evade detection by U.S. law enforcement, they use fake return addresses, include fraudulent invoices that mislabel the products, and disguise the chemicals in packaging such as dog food bags. In just one example, one of the defendants, a pharmaceutical technology company located in China, advertised fentanyl precursor chemicals as well as xylazine for sale online. Drug traffickers may combine xylazine, a horse tranquilizer also known as tranq, with drugs like fentanyl in order to enhance their effects and increase their value. But unlike opioids, the effects of xylazine cannot be reversed by Narcan, and people who inject drug mixtures containing xylazine can develop wounds that result in disfigurement or amputation. As detailed in the indictment, after advertising the precursor chemicals, the pharmaceutical company then shipped them both to the United States and to Mexico, including to a drug trafficker affiliated with the Sinaloa cartel. In one instance, a company executive specifically asked a customer who was asking about the purchase of fentanyl precursors, quote, "Do they need fent?" short for fentanyl. The executive went on to recommend a specific fentanyl precursor to the company, saying that, quote, "All Mexico customers buy it." The executive told the customer the company would ship the precursor under a different chemical name to ensure, quote, "safe custom clearance," close quote. But in fact, the purported customer was an undercover DEA agent. As alleged in the indictment, the company shipped 300 grams of xylazine and 43 kilograms of fentanyl precursors to the United States, where undercover DEA agents received them. The precursor chemicals we received from this company, in just this one case, would have been enough to manufacture more than 72 kilograms of fentanyl. That amount could be used to make more than 15 million fentanyl pills, each one potentially fatal. As the Deputy Attorney General will highlight shortly, the cases being unsealed today are part of a whole of government effort to attack every aspect of the trafficking of deadly fentanyl. That effort includes not only Justice Department prosecutors and DEA agents, but also our partners at the Treasury Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. In a moment, Secretary Mayorkas will discuss, among other things, additional seizures of fentanyl precursor chemicals made by the Department of Homeland Security alongside its DEA counterparts. And Deputy Secretary Adeyemo will discuss sanctions the Treasury Department is imposing today on a set of individuals and entities involved in fentanyl trafficking. That includes all of the China-based companies and individuals being charged in the Southern District of Florida today. Tomorrow, Secretary Mayorkas, Secretary Blinken, and I will be traveling to Mexico City to meet with our government and law enforcement counterparts to discuss the most urgent threats facing our countries. Disrupting the violent cartels manufacturing and trafficking fentanyl will be at the top of that list. In this vein, just 3 weeks ago, we extradited from Mexico Ovidio Guzman Lopez, a leader of the Sinaloa cartel and a son of the infamous El Chapo. He is one of more than a dozen cartel leaders we have indicted and extradited to the United States. He will not be the last. The United States government is focused on breaking apart every link in the global fentanyl chain. That includes holding accountable the chemical companies that we know are fueling the fentanyl epidemic. It is critical that the PRC government stops the unchecked flow of precursor chemicals that are coming from China. I want to thank the U.S. attorneys for the Middle and Southern Districts of Florida and their incredible teams for their work on these cases. I want to thank the DEA and FBI for their tireless efforts in making the actions we announced today possible. And I want to thank our terrific partners from across the government. Finally, I want to express my continued gratitude to some of the most powerful advocates I have ever met. The families who have lost loved ones to a drug poisoning or overdose. Last week, DEA Administrator Milgram and I spent the morning with people from across the country who came to Washington for DEA's second annual Family Summit. They came here because each had lost a loved one to a drug poisoning or overdose. And they came here because they wanted to do everything in their power to prevent that from happening to another family. They remind us why we fight and why the battle is so urgent. We will remember the victims of the fentanyl epidemic. We will pursue justice for them, and we will hold accountable those responsible for these tragedies. Thank you. And now, Secretary Mayorkas.
Thank you very much, Attorney General.
This publication was Global News' first publication fulfilling the breaking news concept. On the basis of breaking news, the media has room to make a mistake within reason of a story they publish, as the story they would be airing would have a time compression, and that the reporter may not have ample time to investigate the data collected that would be getting aired. This law protects the media agency from the human error notion, as the time restriction of having the story quickly put together may not get verified right away. This article was published on October 3, 2023, the same day of the Treasury Department press release. The following is a call received after the November 6 defamatory nationwide broadcast Global News aired about Bobby Shah and Valerian Labs. She had no clue of who I was prior to the event. Prior to the televised piece Global News aired, she tracked my phone number down on the internet. She believed I made fentanyl due to the news. There were clear death threats made towards me and my children, as she had lost her own to fentanyl.
Is this the Valerian Labs?
How can I help you?
Well, I'm just wondering, are you distributing fentanyl?
No, I am not distributing fentanyl.
According to the news.
No.
You are. You're not?
No.
Okay, because both my nephew and his wife have died from overdose. So a lot of people are really, really super angry about drug dealers.
I'm not a drug dealer. If I was a drug dealer, I'd be in jail.
Okay, well, just so you know, we're watching you now. Your name's out there, and we're coming after you. As parents.
You're welcome to
Okay?
come down, no problem.
So you better watch your back and stop selling that shit, okay? You got it? Do you hear me? Do you understand?
I don't sell fentanyl. I
Do
don't
you
make
fucking
fentanyl.
understand me? All you're
have a good day, man. Fentanyl.
8 hours after her initial call, she was smart enough to go to my website and study my licenses and merits, resulting her perception to turn 180 degrees.
We need to have a conversation.
How can I help you?
Is this Bobby?
How can I help you?
Okay, well, I want to understand what's going on. What is going on?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, company I looked at your website. You've got all your health certificates. You've got all the certificates. You're legal.
That is correct.
So, okay. But the United States is accusing you of producing the drugs that are killing people.
That is incorrect. They're not accusing me of that at all.
Okay, well, that's what they're saying on the news.
Well, the news likes the news is HBO. They bullshit their way through. But if you actually read the U.S. government website, you can clearly see what
the U.S. government website?
Yes. Have you not seen it?
Well, no. It's not on your site. Your site, I see you posted all of your certificates.
That's correct.
Okay, so the government, the Canadian government, is on your side.
That's correct.
They have obviously given you the green light.
So let me say let me say it in a way you'd maybe understand. If I brought anything illegal into the country, I would be arrested. I would be charged and persecuted, and that would be real.
Right. Okay, but why is everybody dying?
Because that's a really horrible drug.
It is, and it's really hard because so many people, and I don't know what happened in your life, and I don't know what happened. You know, I won't even question what happened with Romina. I don't know what happened there, but. And I'm so sorry.
The most critical part of this conversation is as follows. Lady, the United States is accusing you of producing the drugs that are killing people, Bobby. That is incorrect. That is not what they are accusing me at all. Lady, well, that's what they're saying on the news, Bobby. The news is HBO. They bullshit their way through. If you actually read the U.S. government website, you can clearly see this lady is literally in the public eye. Although she was a grieving mother and was told by Global News horrific things about Bobby and his company, she was smart enough to go and not only research Bobby's phone number, but also make her way to Bobby's website and audit on her own accord the merits that were posted. With this dramatic change of narratives uncovered, she decides to call Bobby and address the news story she had seen on the TV and question the allegations Global News had litigated on TV for the world to see. And what Global News informed them that when she saw the televised aired piece of Bobby and Valerian Labs, she was under the clear impression that the Treasury Department of the United States was accusing Bobby of being a fentanyl manufacturer, which was false and night and day from what the narrative of what the press conference was about that Global aired on Bobby's news story. This was beyond traumatizing not only for Bobby but also for his family. Global News ever so elegantly crowned Bobby as the de facto killer of Canadians and Americans through being the reason for fentanyl deaths across all of North America. The amount of negativity Bobby has experienced towards him from people in his communities for being a fentanyl producer, from businesses that he did business with, his children's school and the families of their friends, his personal friends, and even the multiple calls from the general public calling him and threatening him and his family has been unrelenting and has not slowed down. This will cause generational damage to Bobby's family, as now his children are facing bullying and will in the future, as this will never go away. The damage to his family, especially when they grow older, will be horrific and irreversible. Furthermore, Bobby and his family are still broken due to Romina's passing, but they were at a point where they were healing from their loss. He's had to relive the moments again, having his children ask what happened and why he was on TV, and being portrayed as a murderer has made him broken as a person. And according to Global News, he can't even have customers. This news piece has done more damage to his life, his family's life, his businesses, and his reputation than anything ever previously published, including when they alluded that a possible new motive for Romina's murder being Bobby that was televised in a new aired piece Global News did just a few months ago once again. Bobby's business has had immense traction to date, but now customers and people in his life are terrified to continue their relationships with him, believing he is a fentanyl kingpin that produces illegal drugs on site. Customers and friends have called and asked and commented on the raid at his facility, and if he had gotten arrested. Global News artistically fabricated and projected to make it look like Bobby went through a high-level drug raid, and even shouldered his valiancy to the infamous Chapo Guzman. The comparison metaphor is quite ironic, as the press conference speech was actually about Chapo Guzman's son, who had taken the reins of the Sinaloa cartel, which Mr. Gardner was addressing. This is ridiculous, as this level of spite and hate towards Bobby from Global News was unwarranted and highly distorted. Any facts and excerpts they used were to create a villain, and this all is beyond proof of malice. Global News pieced together this televised aired piece on Bobby by combining pictures of tables full of drugs, videos of other illegal clandestine drug labs the RCMP had previously raided, and a press conference speech from the Honorary Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Gardner, that once again was completely unrelated to Bobby. However, it was the crowned topic of the United States of America of finally taking down the Sinaloa cartel's boss, son of Chapo Guzman, and 12 of his high-ranking cartel members. Bobby now lives in a perpetual state of fear, as being branded as the sole reason for all the fentanyl deaths in America warrants a high level of hate, and the fear of assassination is quite alarming, as any U.S. citizen who has had a loss in their family due to fentanyl will now believe that Bobby is the sole reason for all the fentanyl poisonings in America of family members lost to this horrible drug that plagues their communities. The lady who called Bobby was a Canadian citizen who was a hurt mother who had lost her kids to fentanyl and had contacted Bobby by tracking down his number online and had made threats to his children and him, fully believing he was a fentanyl producer and a drug dealer. In addition, Global News very elegantly placed pictures and videos of Bobby's residence and his workplace with addresses. Global News has bluntly and maliciously painted a target on Bobby's back. His fear of assassination is very valid and terrifying. On October 3, 2024, Bobby was sanctioned by the United States. The shock of becoming sanctioned was devastating, and the hardship he was dealing with post-sanction was already overwhelming. On October 6, 2024, after Global News aired the televised and fabricated non-factual and malicious piece on Bobby without the care of in good faith, which is the question that the law sets the basis of any lawsuit in Canada, and to which is the primary goal and practice that Global News projected to the public that's referenced in their own website and their 2023 financial statement literature, is just shocking, and the excuse of Global News wanting to hide behind breaking news is not there, as the article that was published on October 3rd is used up and furthermore proving Global News had all the relevant data that this whole thing was not about Bobby but about something so much more grand, such as the United States taking down the Sinaloa cartel. And to add the evidence, the video interview Ms. Urquhart did with Bobby, once subpoenaed to court and play for the judge, will considerably show that Global News had all the data, and that this action against Bobby cannot be simply excused as a simple mistake. And this will show greatly the magnitude of malice that Global News has showed against Bobby. The law is significantly on the side of the media, and the press has a very low bar of getting out of the behaviors they project. But once malice is proven, they lose all their rights and have to answer for their actions. What's happened here to Bobby is not just civil, but criminal. They have put Bobby and his children's life in danger with their televised piece that they aired in addition with the pictures and videos of his home and workplace, and blacklisted him to everyone in North America, placing fear and hate in the public towards him. This televised news piece Global News aired has damaged Bobby's two business entities, his life and reputation, and the generational and foreseeable lives of his 4 children. This behavior from Global News and damages are unprecedented, and the style of defamation is not only malicious but also unprecedented, and quite possibly the biggest defamation case in Canadian history to date. It uses manipulative clips to portray a villain without any credibility or proper disclosure. The remedies expected to this action that was done against Bobby by Global News in this lawsuit will be sought by Bobby to surpass well over $100 million, as the damages done by Global are drastically dire and beyond irreversible, and will follow Bobby's family for at least 2 generations onward. The public already has a rumored or gossip thought process that the mainstream media of the press puts out fake news. However, this case is proof mainstream media televises fake news, and that Global News fabricates non-factual and fake news pieces for the clear reasoning of entertainment, to raise the captivation of their watchers for clear profit, to their own selfish benefit of monetary gain, who will be tried in this case, and will be representing mainstream media, and once flourishing in court, will set serious historical industry-changing precedent in monetary quantum that is paid to people who have been wronged by mainstream media in Canada. And the bar that's currently already ever so low for the media to just get away with the current behaviors they portray will be raised, and will change the entire publication media industry of how they are to be allowed to practice media coverage in Canada. This statement, although strong, can be reflected to the comparison landmark case Regina versus Jordan that was ruled in Saskatchewan on July 8, 2016. This ruling revolutionized the entire Canadian legal system in practice for the RCMP and Crown prosecution, and brought significant changes to the legal landscape in Canada, particularly affecting the criminal justice system. It introduced stricter guidelines regarding the right to a trial within a reasonable time, as guaranteed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Specifically, the ruling established new time limits for bringing cases to trial, and imposed consequences for cases that exceed these limits, such as potential stays of proceedings due to unreasonable delays. This decision prompted the RCMP and Crown prosecutors to reassess their practices and procedures to ensure compliance with the new legal framework and to prioritize timely resolution of cases, or would have to dismiss the case. This landmark case that brought the magnitude change of practice to the entire country was decided by the Supreme Court of Canada, was derived from Barrett Richard Jordan, who was sitting in a provincial remand center awaiting for his trial, but he kept getting delayed, as Crown Counsel could not, for lack of a better word, get their shit together to launch his trial, resulting Jordan having to endure 49.5 months, or around 4 years and 1 month, in jail before his charges were stayed. This duration played a significant role in the Supreme Court of Canada's decision, as it exceeded the new time limit set for bringing cases to trial as per the ruling. For what's happened to Bobby, the damages he is forced to live with are irreversible. There is no retraction or apology Global News can forego to fix the colossal damage they have done to him. And for generations, his children and his children's children will suffer the ramifications of hate and scrutiny that Bobby is a monster. The humiliation Bobby has had, and the stress of 2 great nations believing that he is the reason of fentanyl deaths in America and obviously Canada, puts him in a perpetual state of fear of harm being done to him or his family. It's truly unacceptable what Global News has done, and quite frankly put shame to the whole media industry.